What is the biggest criticism of your work? What is the biggest pushback you've gotten?
The first thing they'll tell me is no religious aspect involved or allowed. You tell them more than you believe they can understand, because they will understand more. As a teacher, I always tell the parents, you think your child is not understanding. They are understanding.
Oh, yeah.
Talk to the parents who feel that way. Maybe are a little bit sad or a little bit confused that they want their kid to experience these great things. Like,
what are the ramifications if we don't? When we're recording this, it's right during the Navratri season. Diwali's around the corner, Halloween, all of these things are coming down the pipe. And it occurred to me that growing up, I actually didn't get a lot of education around what Navratri is, what Diwali is, why these holidays are celebrated, the relevance. It all seemed a little bit weird to me, honestly. And I don't know if you had a similar experience, because I just had difficulty connecting with the rituals with the significance. And I didn't feel like anyone could really explain that to me growing up in the 80s and 90s in a small town, being one of the only Indian families and figuring that out. What was your experience like?
yeah, it's interesting. I grew up in Guyana, and Guyana is 50% Indian, 50% African descent. And so we did have, a lot of exposure to the cultural aspects of it, but from a West Indies lens. And ultimately, I got to the point where I understood something like Diwali has its roots in religion, but now almost is more cultural, right? It's something that's culturally celebrated. No different than Christmas. We're not Christian, but we believe in Santa Claus, and we have presents and things like that. So for me, understanding, I definitely got a lot of exposure to the culture, but like you, not as much per se to the religious aspect as we would have if we were in India.
Yeah. And even I think for people in India nowadays, things have become so westernized that they're losing touch with things. But anyway, that's why I'm just really excited about today's guest. We have on with us Anu Sehgal, who is based out of New York and has made it her life's passion and mission to bring cultural awareness, diversity, equity, inclusion, celebration to a variety of South Asian festivals, holidays, cultural events. And she's doing a bang up job. Anu, welcome to the show.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Namaste and salam, everyone. I'm so honored to be here.
Yes.
We're so happy to be spending time with us.
Yes. Yeah. So you and I connected on LinkedIn. Dinesh and I have said this on repeat. I'm sure the listeners are rolling their eyes now, because we've said over and over the power of social media can make magic happen. And I really feel like that's what you do. In your posts, everything is so just, I love the recent one that you put about the elephant art installation in New York City. That was really incredible. But yes, you and I kind of had a connection through social, and now here we are. And before you actually came on the show, you and I had a chat, didn't we?
That's right.
We had a chat, and you told me all the incredible things that you were doing. And can you just share with the listeners, a little bit about who you are, what you do, and, you've done some incredible things in some incredible places. So I want the listeners to know.
So yeah, thank you so much. My name is, as you mentioned, Anu Sehgal, and I grew up in India, in North India, specifically in UP, in a very different type of household. My mother is Muslim, my father is Hindu. I went to a Catholic school, was surrounded by people from different states, different religions. So a very secular, tolerant upbringing. And that is the DNA of what I believe in and what I do at the Culture Tree. And we'll talk about some of the specific types of events we are hosting. But I moved to the US for my higher education, that typical journey of an immigrant. Worked in finance, worked in marketing, got my MBA in marketing and brand management. And when I had my own two boys, I have my boys are now 15 and 12 years old. That's when the way I was interacting with our culture, Indian culture, completely changed. I took it for granted for a little bit while I was assimilating in America. and I forgot about it. But then I became a very, very voracious consumer of the Indian culture. And the way I was seeing it being taught to children in general and also portrayed, I found it very problematic. And that was the time when I was like, someone has to do something. I don't know who'll do it. Let's just try to do something about it. And that was really the point of switch for me. When I started doing things on my own as I was working in the corporate world, and it took its own life. And it was very clear that, we needed to make it a formal effort. And we had to get everyone behind us to make an impact, not just in the area I am in, but in America in general. So really becoming a parent was the point when I just decided to take things in my own hands.
Yeah. That's interesting, because if you zoom out, and I don't think this is something that I spent a lot of time thinking on until someone pointed out to me. If you zoom out, most people that come from India, they are trying to be more American and less Desi, right? If you think about it, the way they dress, the way they think, the type of food they eat. And even I remember as a kid, I didn't want to take Indian food to school, right? I wanted pizza or chicken nuggets, and I didn't want yellow fingers and all that stuff. But you had an opposite reaction. You wanted to embrace more of the desiness, the things that you came from, and not try to assimilate and be one of a kind with the people, that you were now living amongst, to be accepted. Talk to us about that.
So just to be very clear, when I moved to the US, I was assimilating.
Okay.
Because it was just changing the accent, changing the way I looked. There were too many pressures. And really not sticking out like a sore thumb. So I did go through that time period when, assimilation was all I was thinking about. But yeah, I mean, I grew up eating Indian food every single day, and I find it extremely delicious. I could literally take a green chili in my purse to any place. So those things that I grew up with, that I really cherish, and they're a part of who I am, I couldn't let go of. But I have to say, there was a point when I was like, I'm so comfortable being an Indian, having an accent, and things have evolved since the past 30 years in America also. That pride in your identity, whether it is for second gen, first gen immigrant, like that is changing quite a bit. But, now it's just, I want my children to have so much joy in their duality. To have, I think it's their birthright. It's a birthright of any child to be proud of who they are. And any child, as in any immigrant community. So I think that they will have pride once they see their parents having pride. One thing that I feel we South Asians don't do as much is also talking in the heritage language. And there are issues, there are reasons behind that. Firstly, I can never assume that, Seema, you speak Hindi, or Dinesh, you speak Hindi, just because you might be from different regions. So as it is, our kids have a disadvantage from the language standpoint and from the regionality standpoint, because we can't assume, South Asia, India is so diverse. So we already are using English as a medium, or Western culture as a medium to equalize. So it becomes even more important for the immigrant or first gen, second gen parents to try a little harder to compensate for all those things that are happening.
Yeah, I know for me, and Dinesh, I'm curious what it is like for you and Anjana, but for me, the language is it's an uphill battle sometimes, it feels, because my kids spoke Gujarati. That was the first language they spoke growing up.
Yeah.
And they learned English because they had to. And now, because they're older and I'm not fluent well enough to talk about things like, issues that come up in middle school, right? Peer pressure things and social things, socioeconomic issues. There's emotional issues. So it's becoming more and more English. And so we find ourselves even just sort of figuring out, what does that mean for us to be Indian, Gujarati, proud of what that means. We celebrate Navratri very differently than other people. Blending the two, all of those things sort of come up. And as a parent, I know for me, I do have concerns that maybe my kids aren't getting the pure, authentic, undistilled meanings behind the things that we do culturally, right? And I want them to be proud. I want them to be excited about who they are and what they offer to the world as a direct result. And so I'm curious, you shared a little bit about what you do, but I want to really highlight the culture tree here. And so tell the listeners, what are you doing to amplify and celebrate all of these things and honor your kids' birthright?
So the culture tree has 3 key pillars. The first one is language education, and that is directly targeted to the South Asian community. We focus on 4 languages, and our classes are national. We have developed a program curriculum based on our South Asian American children, their learning styles, which is very important. We are not talking about vocabulary or like case studies that they'll never hear about, that are not relevant to them. So it is a custom-made program, and we do focus on firstly very clearly on the exchange. We call it what are the sentence structures. So script is secondary, but script is very important. Any linguist will tell you, okay, script is a critical thing to make independent language learners in long run. So that is our first pillar, language education. And again, language education for South Asians is not easy. We are never talking. I and my husband, we both speak Hindi, but we never really speak in Hindi at home. So our kids have a unique disadvantage. That has to be provided. Like, I think a lot of people will think, the great grandparents will help us, or nannies will help us. No, they cannot. They cannot explain the grammatical elements, the differences between English and Hindi and Urdu and Gujarati. So for that, you really need a very formal program. So first pillar is our language, and that's my biggest passion. The second pillar for the culture tree is creating cultural programs that are educational, celebratory, and this is what we work with our clients, and our clients can be libraries, schools, cultural institutions, museums, and our cultural programs are becoming bigger and bigger, and they're just at this point they are exploding. And in our cultural programs, we want to make sure, the concept of windows and mirrors and sliding glass doors that we use in Kid Lit. That was, the terms were coined by Dr. Bishop. So that is exactly what we are doing. Our kids, as in the South Asian kids, are seeing they are seeing their culture reflected, and they are feeling proud about how their culture is being reflected. And we are very careful in making sure there is cultural authenticity. The educational aspect comes in. Where is South Asia on the map? So we start from the very big picture, which is also important. People don't know. People are mostly saying South Asia, Southeast Asia instead of South Asia. And that's one of my pet peeves. Just show them it is South of Asia. That's the reason it's South Asia. Start with simple tidbits like that. And then we tell them, okay, so there are so many countries in South Asia. And all the countries are same. but they are different. So, we talk in the language kids understand, and
Yeah.
we make it really fun. We have created puppet shows, performances that really bring those stories, Seema, that you're talking about for Navratri. There's so many stories. There's not
Mm.
just story from Gujarat. What about the story of Durga from West Bengal? So we bring those things alive, which even the South Asian communities sometimes, the adults are like, we didn't know this.
Mhm.
So that comes through in our cultural programs. Um, and then one other thing that we try to do through our cultural programs is, again, bringing the diversity
Mm.
of South Asia or of India to the forefront. Because what we have seen in the past is in America, people assume India or Indian is one person, one culture. No, 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 no. There are
Yeah.
so many subcultures.
Yeah.
And they are so different. The foods are different. The
Mhm.
languages are different. The customs are different. So we try to bring those to the forefront as well. So I
Yeah.
would say the biggest thing right now for us is the cultural programs. And we are doing a lot on the East Coast, the tri state area. And then the third thing that is happening all by itself is our company is becoming or has become a community based organization. If the governor's office, mayor's office, embassy, consulate wants to reach out to the diaspora, they come to us.
Mhm.
If the diaspora wants to reach out to all these institutions or showcase what they do, they come to us. So we are getting writers, we are getting small businesses, we are getting artists. They're coming to us and saying, this is what we have to offer. Can you help us? And I really feel for them because all these artists, and I call them cultural ambassadors, are phenomenal at what they do, but they just don't have the reach. They don't know how to, make social media work, do the social media marketing, um, like reach out to these big institutions. So
Mhm.
we are acting like those institutions that are helping them bridge that gap. So I think three things that we are doing very effectively. All three are growing, and there is a lot of pride and a lot of like all my educators and teachers are so proud of what they are doing because they see the impact firsthand.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I mean, it's such important work. I have a couple of questions slash comments. One, you mentioned that the cultural and the language are important. Tell us what part food plays, because I think you mentioned different
Yeah.
foods. The other point that I wanted to make is that I'm Sindhi, and so even a lot of Sindhis don't speak Sindhi; they speak Hindi, and they are more broad-based. You know, oriented when it comes to Indian culture or less Sindhi culture. And the third, we've talked about this in the past, but our parents' generation and maybe some of the generation that was first to move here, uh, they were exposed to the partition.
Yeah.
And there may be feelings one side or the other about the partition that may be through a lens that may be biased, maybe not, right? Are you doing anything to, for lack of better words, accurately reflect or set the record straight for things about the partition, things about Gandhi, so many things that we learn through a lens of either the Western side or what our parents or what someone experienced, but then you go dig into it and you actually read about it, and
Mhm.
maybe it's not quite as factual or as accurate as the stories are told. So tell us about, I know that was a lot. Tell us about those three
No, I,
aspects,
I wrote it all down. So
and
the
mostly about the food. We're interested in
yeah,
food, good
We
food.
love food.
Yeah.
just to clarify, your second question about the Sindhi language is, are people using Hindi as a substitute?
Well, that's what I mean. Overall, when we're addressing culture and things like that,
Yeah.
are we inadvertently promoting the broader based culture
Mhm.
at the detriment of some of the lesser known cultures, for example? Like, I think it's
Mm.
very hard to put on a Sindhi event specifically, things like that.
Yeah.
And your thoughts on how can we amplify the subcultures?
Subcultures. Very good question. So let's talk about food. So food is a very important part of the multi-sensorial experience that we give during our program when we are celebrating any sort of festival or any subculture. Food is the easiest way to connect with anyone. So for children specifically, we have created a very hands-on session in which they will make aloo parathas, or they will make their own mithai during Diwali, or they will hear stories about food from different parts of South Asia, or they'll make during Eid, they'll create their own khajur, their own date. So these are actually programs that are happening for each of our events, and we are working with some chefs who are helping us really bring this to the educational level as well as the fun interactive level. And then they taste their food and the kids are like, wow, this was amazing. So we are bringing literature into the whole food angle. This year we worked with Priya Krishna, who is New York Times food reporter, and she launched her new kids book. And we had several events with her in which she talked about different foods from different parts of the world, and specifically, from India, we hosted an event in which for Holi, in which she talked about shahi tukras, and then the kids wrote down the recipe. So it was a recipe that is, writing recipe is a lost art in this day of Reels and TikTok and Insta. And we made children write down the recipe as they were hearing. And then the children tasted their own shahi tukra, which took it to the next level, because once you taste, you're like, okay, yeah, we now understand. We do mithai tasting, and we have this, we'll have 6 different types of mithais, and we'll ask our audience to taste the mithai and tell us, what ingredient are you tasting? What spices are you tasting? So it's almost like a game. People, kids, adults, anybody loves it. Who doesn't like identifying stuff and getting brownie points for mithai points for it? So
mithai points.
It's exploding. It's just next year, actually, I'm going to do a specific event that will be all around food. Again, bringing all these amazing writers and illustrators who are writing about food and documenting recipes. And I feel for our kids, documenting recipes is an important art. The recipes, and our parents' generation, my mom, whenever she's telling me a recipe, she's like, thoda sa ye, thoda sa.
I know.
I'm like, or ek CT, do CT. They're all estimates, but how do we capture all that? So I feel very passionate about food. I work in New York City, I'm working with all these amazing chefs that are really behind what I'm doing. So I think food will just go to the next level next year. We will have one event just on food, and authors that have written different types of books. I had also worked with author Shweta, who has written a book about the Dalit food from India. So, we are looking at all these sub-communities and, their usage of jowar and bajra and, all these types of millets that are very common for that community. So we are highlighting different things and making sure they make sense in the type of programs we do. So for Diwali, we have to have mithai. There's nothing else, right? For Holi, it's shahi tukra or it's thandai. For Eid, it's khajur. So we are very thoughtful and thorough about what we are reflecting from food standpoint. Then as far as language or cultural reflection and how we, use Hindi for everything sometimes, or We use a certain community as an example to reflect everything else. So we are very mindful about that. Extremely, extremely mindful. As I mentioned, I grew up in North India. The only story I ever heard was Ram Leela about Diwali. We used to go through the Dashera and we saw the beautiful portrayal of Ram Leela for all the 10 days. And, it was just ingrained in us. But now that I'm here and I am not just surrounded by North Indians, but I'm seeing all the different communities come through, we are changing the narrative. We are making sure all the other regions and subcultures are reflected respectfully, authentically, and correctly. So I work with, artists from South India. I'll work with just to make sure everyone is being reflected in the right way. And I can't do it. I'm no one to. I can just bring them together. So I'm very humble about it, but then also very thorough about it. So Seema, you mentioned the elephants exhibit, the Great Elephant Migration, which is, by the way, the most phenomenal exhibit I've ever seen in my life. And it's actually moving through different parts of US right now. Even if people have to travel to see it, they should. I think Indians definitely need to go see it along with their kids. So just imagine there are 100 elephants in downtown Manhattan, specifically in Meatpacking District right now. And each elephant sculpture is inspired from a real elephant and in South India. And they have a little name card, which is the real name of that elephant.
Oh.
And 100 of them. When I saw it, I was blown away.
Wow.
So for that exhibit, we are doing the closing day ceremony and program that is basically focused towards children. So the way we are doing it is we have the two stories, well-known stories and books about the elephants from India. One is written, it was written by the Jain community, the elephant and the 5 blind men. And while we are telling that story, our dancer is dancing Bharatnatyam, and kids will learn some mudras. But because the elephants are from South India, I was like, we have to have Bharatnatyam dance. It has to be a South Indian dance form to give it its due respect and also reinforce where these elephants are from. And, small little things like that, some people will notice them and some will not. It's okay. But I, as an educator, have to make that connection. So we are very, very careful about that. Last year, we had a series of events for children, and they basically said, okay, Anu, come up with a theme. And I basically wanted to reflect different religions that originated in India. So we had an event around Hinduism. We had an event around Jainism, Buddhism. And again, we made the events around Mahavir Jayanti or Buddha Jayanti. Like it's basically, things, celebrations that are popular in India, but they are all done by these different communities. And I just brought them together. I curated it very well. And we made it very educational. So all these sub-segments are being reflected through our programs. I have to say the popular ones are the Diwalis and the Holis, because that's what gains the most traction in terms of attendance. But it doesn't matter. Numbers, I feel, don't matter sometimes. It is just starting a discussion around these sub-communities, subcultures, and then the community will take it to the next level. But you have to start the conversation.
I have a question here, because clearly you're very passionate about your work and doing it authentically, doing it in an inclusive way that doesn't just allow an overshadowing of one subculture over another.
Yeah.
But, you've been hosted by, the New York Public Library. the White House, the mayor's office has awarded you many times over for the work that you do. What makes it so impactful, so efficacious? I just want the listeners to sort of get a glimpse into really how your belief systems about things in the world are creating such impact generating events.
Yeah, I think one thing that I see firsthand, so I had my Seaport Navratri event. So one thing that I see firsthand is I bring our kids, kids from our community into being my allies right away. Like if we are doing countdown, we'll be like, who knows counting in Hindi? And I'll bring the kids. And they just take so much pride in being the ambassadors right then and there on the stage. And the parents feel very proud. So, bringing in the community to become your cheerleaders is one of the ways in which I just start my programs and get them interacted at that level, not this level. So that is one thing, but then also the type of educators and cultural ambassadors that I am hiring or I am bringing, curating, I make sure they really align with what we are trying to do. We are not doing it for money. None of my educators or dancers, they're doing it for money. That is secondary. It is very important, and I'm going to fight the fight to make sure they are financially being given the due amount. But it's the next level for all my educators. My teachers, my language teachers, again, are just next level. They have that joy of teaching and making an impact that is critical. And then the third thing is the type of institutions I'm working with. They understand what I'm doing. They let me do what I'm doing. They're not telling me, oh, Anu, can we just shortchange this? Can we? No, they believe in what I'm doing. I do get a lot of resistance from some organizations, and I'm very happy to drop them because I just feel that if our community and our culture is not being reflected in the right way, there's no point.
Yeah.
We can't do it half-hearted. So I think finding those allies is the key thing. And I've been very fortunate in finding those allies who are understanding what I'm doing and going behind what I'm doing. And I think my educators, like I keep telling, my husband also, my teachers, my educators are my first priority. Even my kids are second priority, because I was like, okay, our kids should be yours first priority because I just couldn't do without them. Just impossible. So we have to get back to the partition question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great question.
Yeah, that's an amazing
what are your thoughts?
question. Yeah. And especially from the point of view of, my father, as I mentioned, Hindu, he moved from Northwest Frontier Province to Delhi during partition. It was a very challenging, trying time for his family. Again, not documented that well, and I'm sad about that. And then my mother is Muslim, but she grew up in MP in India. So growing up, we did hear a lot about growing up in India. We heard a lot about partition because all those traumas were still very real in the case of our grandparents and parents' generation. So it did surround us. The celebrations of the Republic Day or the Indian Independence Day brought those to light, or Gandhi Jayanti, Dinesh, as you mentioned about Gandhiji also, brought them to life, and we revisited all those movies and stories, and we had celebrations around it. Like I remember for Republic Day, we used to have all these plays that kids used to enact the stories of all those freedom fighters and Gandhiji and all that. So that is an important topic. Luckily, right now, there are a lot of books coming out about the partition, whether it is from the standpoint of Pakistan, whether it's from the standpoint of India. There are a lot of South Asian, Pakistani, as well as Indian authors writing about it in children's books. So that is a very good news. There is a brand new partition museum in Delhi, which I haven't seen, but I want to see at my next visit. So definitely, like everyone who's going to India should try to go to the partition museum, because all the kids need is that little intro, and then they'll take it to the next level themselves if they're interested. I have done programs around partition. This is pre-pandemic, because that is an important topic, I feel. I've had several celebrations every year on Gandhi Jayanti as well, where we talk about partition. So, and then when we are teaching our lessons, whether it's Urdu or Hindi or Gujarati or Punjabi, our lesson plans are thematic. Each class is thematic. So we just talked about Gandhiji in Hindi or in Urdu, or just talking about what happened, who he is in that specific language, but then also bringing in the cultural element. And pre-pandemic, we had a literary festival in which we had hosted author Veera Hiranandani, who's written a book called Night Diaries.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Recommend everyone to read it. Child, parent, grandparent, because everybody relates to this book. It's written in the form of letters a girl writes to her mother who has died while they are traveling from Pakistan to India. It is extremely moving, extremely accurate, and, it's just a wonderful reading. I read it with my boys, and then I gave it to my mom, and she read it, and she was like, I couldn't put it down. So those topics are very important. And again, I'm from India, so again, I bring in one side to it, but I'm very happy to hear a Pakistani point of view, because it'll be different, and it's okay, it's different. So just bringing in all those authors and sources together, because partition is not talked about, but it is one of the most monumental mass migrations that happened in modern times, and genocide. Like, I think everyone should know about it, specifically the South Asians and our South Asian kids. And that's up to us to highlight the books and, create books at different grade levels, or bring in books that are already written that are just amazing.
Yeah. No, that really resonated with me, in that we attend temple on Sundays, and this past Sunday, we were talking about the fact that it is right now a holy time for those who celebrate in the Vedantic faith. And it occurred to me as I was listening to, I was just learning, honestly, because I knew some things, very, very high level things that, probably anybody could Google. And as I learned more and more about this very, very popular, it's a big holiday, I realized how much I didn't know. Yeah. And I got, honestly, really angry and frustrated in the moment at my parents, because I thought, why didn't you teach me this? Why didn't you share with me all of these things? And the reason I bring that up now is when I shared that with the acharya that is at this mandir, she said, Seema, the thing is, the parents wound up getting a very secular education because of the partition. Yeah. And I just never really thought about it, right? You don't think in 2024, what happened all those years ago? It's so easy to sweep it under the rug and say, let's just everyone get along and everybody be friends and forget about it and move forward. And I believe that we can, right? We can find that human connection. We can honor multiple, Anu, as you said, multiple sides of the story and still be kind to one another. Yeah. But still really recognize the impact that that has had. So now I'm having to go back. I have the opportunity, rather, I should say, to go back and learn and ask questions and figure out, what does celebrating look like for me and my family, especially now that the kids are also immersed in Halloween. They're looking at, whatever, Thanksgiving that's around the corner as well. And so what does it look like for a family that is trying to navigate this? How can we do that accurately? And my question based on that comment is, how do you mentioned honoring the Pakistani side of things, honoring the Indian side of things, the Muslim versus the Hindu side of things. How are you able to do that so effectively? Because it's such a raw, visceral response. If you ask my parents' generation, right? It's a very charged topic.
Yeah.
And your goal is actually the opposite. It's to bridge, to love, to heal.
Yeah. Yeah. So firstly, regarding partition, I remember when I was little and we used to bring it up, I and my sisters used to bring up, tell us about the partition, when we used to ask our grandmother. And I think it was so traumatic to her. She never wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
And we didn't realize it at that time. And we used to complain, our grandmother, she doesn't want to talk, this, that. But now I realize it was so traumatic that, it was almost like ripping the Band-Aid and just revisiting that as she was telling us. So I think that's part of the reason, as I mentioned, like I feel these stories were never documented. And even if we ask questions from our parents' generation or our grandparents, we didn't get many responses. So I think that's something I feel now I should respect because it was so traumatic to them.
Sure.
But going back to your other question about say that question again, Seema.
How do you talk about things like the partition and our differences and honor different sides in a way that heals rather than adds fuel to the fire?
So one very quick way to do that is whenever we are creating a program, we strip out the religion. We are not talking about religion. Even when I'm doing an Eid celebration or a Diwali celebration, I'm not delving deeply on the religious aspect or the religious practices. I'm just going to the mythological stories. This is the story of Ram from North India. This is the story of Krishna from South India. So all I'm doing is giving them facts. And when you give facts in a very factual way, emotions don't rise as much. And that is actually a mandate, like at New York Public Library or Asia Society, or most of the museums that I work with, especially with kids, they don't want any religious, aspect to come through. It should be celebratory. It should be factual. It should be mythologies, folk tales, all that. So, if I'm not getting emotional about stuff, the audience will not get emotional.
Right.
So that's how we do it. We are an educational company first. And, as long as you are educating and not saying, oh, let's do, like even if you're doing meditation, most of our clients will not let us do an Om chant. They just cannot. We had an event in which we had a toy, and the toy had some chants in it, and they basically said we cannot sell it. So it's as, black and white. But still, there is so much to be done. Those stories that Seema, you were talking about that you didn't know about, even about Navratri, even that is so much work for us. Like the amount of work we have to do as cultural educators, it's just a lot. So that's how we keep it more like a celebration, more factual, more fun, more interactive, because once you bring in those little elements, that's when it starts getting sticky.
What is the biggest criticism of your work? What is the biggest pushback you've gotten?
The biggest pushback, I think in general, when I'm working with a new organization, the first thing they'll tell me is no religious aspect involved or allowed. But I am completely aligned with that. And that's the reason I think, when I'm working with institutions, it's worked so well because I'm completely aligned with it. But don't get me wrong, like I do have Bhagavad Gita camps during the summer that I do with author Rupa Pai.
Yeah.
And we talk about Bhagavad Gita and how its teachings are relevant even in this day and age.
Yes.
But again, I'm not telling people to convert to Hinduism.
Right. Yeah.
Those teachings, all these CEOs are using those teachings.
Yeah.
So we do bring in religion. Like for Diwali, one of our events is going to be Lakshmi and Ganesh Puja at a temple. And religion will be there.
Yeah.
But again, people are going to sub-select, like only people who want to do puja will come for that.
Sure.
But if I'm hosting an event at Asia Society or at the Met, I'm not going to delve into a specific segment unless and until that event is about a specific segment. So, making those decisions makes it easier.
One of the criticisms I'm hearing, especially from the yoga world and things like that, is this colonialization of ancient practices, right? Taking out, it's not necessarily that it's religious, but it's more the ancient knowledge that has been passed down, right? So you mentioned taking out the word Om in a meditation. I'm not the expert here. I don't know, but I have heard some people say that, that almost whitewashes it, for lack of a better term, or dilutes it. But yet everything you do is so authentic, right? So it's just so remarkable. Because it sounds like that is actually, maybe I'm making this up, but if I heard it correctly, it is a challenge for you to really find where that line is of being really authentic without diluting it, but then still being accurate and true. Like a meditation without that Om, really it's just a frequency. It's not really anything to do with whether you read the Bible or you read the Gita,
Yeah. And actually, we did have an event, a mindfulness event, in which it was all about Om. So it depends, where we really went into the science behind that word and the first word that ever originated in the universe and how it is supposed to go through your system, and from Ayurvedic also standpoint. We did delve into it, but we are not using Om all the time, because what if there are Muslims or Christians or, who knows who our audience is.
Sure.
So as long as it's not all around that specific topic, we try to stay away from things that might bring in religious aspect or political aspects into it, which is when it starts getting hairy. But our primary programs are targeted towards preschoolers and elementary school kids. So it's simple. It's just, you keep it fun, you keep it educational, you tell them more than you believe they can understand, because they will understand more. Like I always, as a teacher, I always tell the parents, you think your child is not understanding. They are understanding. When I have my bilingual story times are very popular at New York Public Library. And the kids in general, whether it's American kids or Indian kids, they will leave with like 10 new words that they learn in Hindi or Urdu. And people, first they think, they will not understand, but they do understand. Like kids are the most fun. They're like sponges, and they ask you questions that I'm like, I have my next book just because, these kids are giving me so many ideas. So it is not overthinking, but then also coming up with processes. And I've learned it in the last 10 years. A lot of learning.
Yeah. Well, you've got a really deep knowledge on marketing and branding. Anu, you've done some incredible work around, your cultural programs, bringing real life experiences into the communities that you work with. But you're also an author. Tell us about your books. Tell us about your inspiration. Share with our listeners all the things that you want them to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm an accidental author. The real author, I have an older sister. She is the one who writes really effectively, but she doesn't get as much time. So I'm an accidental author because as I've been teaching children about these different languages and cultures and subcultures, I have realized that there are so many other stories that have not been written about.
Mhm.
So I basically write stories. I call them lost stories from India that I experienced growing up in India. So they're so rich and memorable that I remember them, but I never saw anything written about them as an adult or in America. So I've been writing about those lost stories, and frankly, I've been reliving them as I write them or as I tell children about those stories. So it has been one of the biggest joys in the last few years. Um, and I also write I try to write wherever possible in Hindi language. And I write books that are almost like white spaces. So lost stories or stories that really fit into these programs we can create for children. And not just the culture tree, but programs that can be created by a parent at a child's classroom or a school can use. So all my books now have been made into experiences. Been made into puppet shows. They've been made into dance performances because I really believe that just reading is not enough. You have to envelop the children into these experiences that are going to be so memorable that they'll remember. Um, my latest book has been on the lotus flower, which has such a huge significance in Eastern civilization, not just India, but so many other countries. That is all about teaching children resilience. And we end the book in giving tips to children in doing a lotus meditation and doing the lotus pose and becoming a lotus in mind and body. So, we take it a little further than just it being a book reading. It becomes an experience for children. So I have many more books in my mind, but hopefully I'll keep writing and bringing the real experiences from South Asia through my books.
Where can we find your books?
The easiest is Amazon. All my books are listed under my name, but I have different publishers, and you can buy it through the publishers as well.
Amazing.
Yeah, so inspiring. So you're a parent, right? I think you have some kids that are maybe older than mine and more similar to age as Seema. I want to paint a picture for you and help us navigate this picture. We might be going out to an Indian restaurant and I'm having a mango lassi. And there was a time where I didn't want to have mango lassis because it was Indian. And now my life is much richer because I can oscillate between a vanilla milkshake and a mango lassi. And I say to my 9-year-old son, "Hey, bud, you want to try this?" And the response is, "Nah, bruh, chill. I'm okay with my Sprite or my water or whatever." And, I know from my perspective and being old and fogey now that he's going to one day hopefully want to learn about his culture. But right now, that's not on his list, right? Right now, it's something else. Talk to the parents who feel that way and maybe are a little bit sad or a little bit confused that they want their kid to experience these great things like aloo paranta or faluda, or go and learn how to do bhangra and learn how to do ras and all those things, but their kids have no interest in that. Talk to us about how we can flavor that, whether we should leave that alone, let them figure it out themselves, and how can we, in a way that it honors their American side, their individual side, their preferences, without being too pushy or being too pushy. What do you see parents are doing, and what's most successful?
Both as a parent and as an educator, I really believe that we, the parents, have to expose our kids to their heritage culture and almost normalize their duality. And, going to the temple, it can be really fun. So bring it in a positive light. Go with a friend, bring along their friends if they're being resisting that. So just building a community around that and starting it right at the beginning. as a toddler, because there's no negotiation around that.
Yeah.
As far as food is concerned, ask them to make food, Indian food with you,
Yeah.
because they taste their food made by them in a very different light than the parents.
Yeah.
So just exposure to all these different ways in which they can experience the culture is critical right from the beginning.
Yeah.
The second thing is, for South Asian parents, or actually any immigrant parent, pick one thing that will be immersive for them. Whether it is classical dance. In my kids' case, both boys, they were not gravitating towards music or Indian musical instruments or dance. So language was the other thing. And I am very, very, very persistent when it comes to the language. My kids have done piano and they have already abandoned it now that both of them are teens. But language is a non-negotiation. Firstly, because I don't want to have my kids not speak Hindi. That's just a bad example with my language. But I think definitely the parents should introduce one thing, one topic that they obsess about.
Yeah.
And the kids will have a point of return at some point. In language learning and also in cultural immersion, it's much easier when the kids are toddlers, preschoolers, and in elementary school. What we see, and this is a fact-based study that shows that language learning in middle school, there is a time when kids stop learning the heritage language. And that is because they are trying to fit in and assimilate and look cooler. So let them go at that time, because it's just going to be impossible. And it'll become a pain. So you don't want to interfere at that point. And then what we see is during high school, they come back to the culture. Yeah. But it is imperative that in those preschool and elementary school years, find a way in which they are hearing about, learning about the culture. And it's not easy for the parents. Like even when my kids are around and I'm going to a fruit vendor who's Indian, I will make sure I speak in Hindi. If I'm in a cab and there is someone from South Asia and they understand Hindi or Urdu, I will make sure I'm speaking, because I want to normalize it for my kids. Yeah. So I think those are the two key things. The third thing is just the children's bookshelves and toys. At those younger ages, just buy books, even if you have to donate them to the library and they don't read it. Just have enough things around them that remind them of their heritage culture. So I think those are the three ways in which you can do it. Again, it's easier said than done. But hopefully, with the type of programs that we create, we are making the parents' lives easier. Yeah. And also the lives of the other children, the non-South Asians, the way they look at our children. If they're wearing a kurta, so cool that they're wearing a cool kurta. Yeah. So it basically, again, goes back to the mirrors and windows discussion. Yeah. Just normalize it.
What are the ramifications if we don't? Because there's plenty of people in, I can look around and find Indians just like me who were born here, brought up here, and they're like, the kids won't really use Gujarati. They won't use Hindi. It doesn't matter. Like, that's not my jam. What is at stake by choosing not to honor our culture?
I think self-worth is the biggest ramification, I would say. Our kids have that positive self-worth about their uniqueness, about their skin color, and the differences they have, because they understand the differences. And they feel, the differences are so cool. I play the harmonium instead of piano. That's so what? But it's so cool. So that I think could be the ramification. But then at some point, like, let it go also, because South Asian cultures are having a moment in America and worldwide.
Mm.
um, People are gravitating towards our culture, our clothes, our food, our art, and at some point they may return back to the heritage culture. They may work in South Asia. Who knows? So there are points of returns, but I feel that confidence that comes when you own your identity
Mm.
is so important, so critical. But it cannot be just by us teaching our kids about their culture. It has to be a dual step. The population in general also has to understand the nuances
Mm.
Yeah.
and respect the nuances and have that empathy. So it has to go hand in hand. Like, our kids are not, like, if they have an unpronounceable name and everyone is making fun of it at the soccer field,
Mhm.
it's okay to have an abbreviation. You
Mm.
know, we
Yeah.
can't as parents insist on them being the unique people around. So we have to help them through, but then also we as parents have to give them all the tools necessary. And
Mm.
if it is, if your child is already in middle school or whatever, it's fine. It's never too late.
Mm.
Um, and in high school, actually, they take ownership on their own.
Yeah.
To do it. But there are so many ways to instill it. Like, I feel for my kids, language worked the best. But with other families, different things might work.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I like what you said about a turnaround point. That came for me in my second year of college, where I was in a environment with many more Indians than I had been for the last 10 years. Anu, this has been such a great episode. I knew I was looking forward to chatting with you from all the work you've done, and it's been absolutely amazing. And the work you're doing is so inspiring. And it helps a lot of parents recognize that there are resources out there. Thank you so much. At the end of every episode, our listeners are familiar with a wrap up that we do, where Seema and I we take turns asking you some questions to get to know you a little bit more. So the first thing, we live in a world where instant gratification is king, right? We want to get a return on our investment right away. So give our listeners a tip, whether it's related to your work or from your past or anything that they can do today in their lives to make it better.
So I am a big believer of the Frozen song, Let It Go.
Oh, yes.
I just let it go. I'm like, okay, you know what? This is not worth my time, this project. Okay, I spent 10 hours. It's fine. Let it go. This relationship, it's just sucking everything. Let it go. So that is my mantra. I know it's not from the Vedas or the Upanishad.
It actually is. It actually is.
It actually is. But it's just so simple. And I'm like, let it go.
So
well, winter's
powerful.
coming, so maybe the thing we need to advise is the cold never bothered me anyway.
Yeah. And I use it both in my personal life and professional life. Because there are so many projects that, you invest time and energy and money and everything. But there has to be a point when you decide, is it worth pursuing or just letting it go?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. Wise words that every 3-year-old girl in America at least knows.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Oh my goodness. This is honestly one of my favorite parts. It's called Ask It Forward. And so, listeners, if you're brand new to the show, here is how Ask It Forward works. We have this tradition where the last guest has left a question for you, Anu, and not knowing who you are, what we're going to talk about, when we're going to record, they don't know anything. So this question is actually from Dr. Swati Nikam, who is basically leading the charge of the American Friends of Help Age India, which is an organization that is focusing on supporting the 90% of elders in India that are underserved. So it's a really fantastic organization. But Dr. Nigam asks, what is one experience that you haven't really shared or rarely shared that has been valuable for you so that you could navigate your personal or professional journey ahead?
There have been so many experiences that have helped me shape who I am and shape what I do. I think one of the most, like the turning points for me when I started the Culture Tree was when I had taken my children to a children's museum in the area, and they were doing a celebration. This is as a parent, not as the founder of the Culture Tree. So they were doing an event for Holi. It was all around Holi, Festival of Colors. And they were reading during the book reading segment, they were reading a book about Diwali. And that was the point when I decided something has to be done from my work standpoint. Just, it was very cringeworthy. It was, again, like I thought that this is where we are right now. So there's only room to grow. So that is a very specific moment that happened. I saw it building up, but after that, I was like, I'll do something, whether I do it part-time, full-time, but I'll do something about it. So I think that moment helped me. But again, there are so many instances growing up in India that, like, I feel now I'm honoring those moments, those experiences. And, growing up in India can be very raw, even for a child, because there is just so much happening around you that I'm thankful for. But I also was traumatized at that point in my life. That have shaped me, and hopefully it's shaping my children also, because I'm reliving those experiences with them.
So powerful. And we're so grateful that you've started at the Culture Tree and are making waves in the ways that you are. It's really, really incredible. Anu, what is a question that you would then want to leave for the next guest?
Yes, I loved this part, frankly, when I heard about this, because, whether it is through a class that I do or program that I do or an interaction that I have with a new person I'm meeting, one of the key things I'm looking forward to hearing is, we are doing so much in our lives. How do you make what you do a domino effect? For me, I'll just give you an example. Kids watch a puppet show that we have created, and then we give them their artwork is creating the puppets from the show. And we say, now you heard the story, right? Now go and tell that story to your friend. Go and do the puppet show for your parents, for your grandparents. So I personally believe that you have to, especially with kids, you have to take the learning beyond the classroom. So for us, people in general, whether we are in working in a cause-based organization or a corporate environment, how are we making the impact go beyond that first degree of contact? And I think about it in every single thing I do. Writing books, I'm like, book is created, the reader is reading, but will they tell the story to other people? Will they share this experience? So I think all of us should start thinking about that. And that is the question I have for the next speaker that you'll have.
Really good question. I think for the first time, I'm going to answer the question on the air right here.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so how do we make what we do, which is today's recording, a domino effect? And that is by giving our guests an opportunity to share a cause or organization that is near and dear to their heart, so that on behalf of you and in appreciation to thank you, Seema and I can make a contribution to that organization. I think it does a couple of things. I think it highlights real organizations that we know where contributions actually make a difference, but also shares with us some different organizations that we may not be aware of. And that is the next part of our wrap up. So Anu, tell us, what is an organization that that matters to you, so that our conversation here today can have a domino effect to maybe someone who doesn't even know that the podcast exists?
My organization is education based. So Pratham, which is a very well known organization, it has some direct impact it has on children's education. But then there is, I think people don't know about this. There is also a Pratham Books segment and platform in which Pratham writes these books. I mean, they hire authors and illustrators to write books that reflect stories of those children that are getting the money. Specifically, Pratham Books would be my recommendation, because we use those books when we are teaching languages as well as making kids experience our culture.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So much great work that Pratham does. Post-pandemic, it's upwards of 50% of fifth graders cannot read at a second grade level. And so the work that Pratham does is just absolutely fantastic. Huge fan over here. Anu, you've offered such a wealth of information. You've created a lot of insights, a lot of just really, really interesting new ways of looking at things. And Dinesh and I both want our listeners to know exactly where to find you, where they can get their hands on your work, and how they can support the Culture Tree.
Our website is theculturetree.com. The has to be added. I think a lot of people just do Culture Tree. So theculturetree.com. And it's the same on Instagram, the Culture Tree. Definitely follow us. And if you ever experience our programs, tag us. When that's like one quick way in which people can support organizations and small businesses. But I think one way in which especially people from the diaspora can help us is just spread the word. You know, language class enrollment is a very emotional decision for parents.
Yeah.
And just by seeing an ad, people are not going to enroll. But if you have experienced our programs, our approach, or even been in our classes, just tell people around you. I have a lot of classes of siblings. We create sibling and cousin pods. Or friend pods. That is the most popular thing. So one parent comes to us and then they bring 6 other kids.
Yeah.
So definitely experience our classes. Proof is in the pudding. Like I basically say, for our language classes, we have created a gold standard. That is one way to do it. Call us to your schools. Call us to your classrooms to do book reading. Just spread the word about the Culture Tree and the impact we are having.
I have a follow-up. The pods that you talked about, are they in person or are they virtual?
They're virtual because like literally I have 4 pods of cousins that are all over. One is in Canada, all over the US. And these cousins are having such a great time learning with each other. And parents are sending me videos of these cousins traveling to India together and negotiating in Hindi. It's just like out of this world. If I could have the rights to use their videos, it would be like the most viral video.
I love it.
But yeah, that's the pods that I'm talking about.
Wow.
So beautiful.
And it's very long term because, you know, like if the cousins are having fun with each other, learning about their heritage, it's a very different type of experience for them. It's not like the parents are sitting and saying, no, you have to learn. You have to learn. They just want to learn now. They want to have their own secret language.
Yeah. It's so cool to see them, you know, strengthen their bonds of the family too, right? It's multi-level riches that you're creating there.